rights. Now, what is that? Why is it necessary? And what are the implications for Trinidad and Tobago's trade relationships? Well, I have a couple of guests who are going to offer some perspective on that. Close to me is Olav Stockmo, the Chief Executive Officer of the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organization. And further from me is Steve-Maximay, who was from plain old Trin City. He's the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Reprographic Rights Organization. And we're going to get some context to that. Good to have you with us, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Just the mention of the word reproduction rights. Immediately people think abortion, the rights of women, aspire, and all of these issues. Mr. Stockmo, you're a Norwegian by birth, based in Brussels, where the IFRRO is based in Brussels in Belgium. What is this organization about?
It's all about making copies, because when you need to make a copy of a work, then it's a reproduction. So these organizations exist now in more than 60 countries throughout the world. We have 129 members. And then you need to make a copy of portions of works, be it an article in a newspaper or in a book. Then you need to have the authorization of the authors and the publishers. And these organizations are then set up to do a one-stop shop on that.
Why is that important? Because some might see it as very, very trivial. A photocopy, what is the big issue with that? Why is it important?
Well, it's important because it stimulates the culture in a country. And when you want to reproduce a book, or when you want to buy a book, then of course you make contact directly with the author and the publisher. But if you need to copy, like they do in universities, like they do in the universities of the West Indies, for instance, then you will make copies of several chapters, articles put together, etc., from several authors, several publishers throughout the world, and then you need a one-stop shop to do it, because if not, it's not possible. And then rewarding the authors and the publishers for this is extremely important, because it stimulates the creation of new works, it stimulates the culture, and it's extremely important for the economy.
Mr. Maxwell, you know we have a problem in Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to respecting intellectual property rights, or any sort of rights for that matter. You are the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Reprographic Rights Organization. Have you been able to make any headway? In fact, what do you do in relation to these particular issues discussed by Mr. Stockmo?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that we have a difficulty with respecting property in Trinidad and Tobago, both tangible and intangible. And it seems my life was tailor-made for this kind of thing, because the two areas that I'm involved in professionally are agriculture and the knowledge economy. Yes. And in agriculture, as you'd appreciate, pre-deal larceny is seen as something,
as almost normal.
As almost normal. And so much so that you now have special squads in the police service to deal with pre-deal larceny, as if it's not really thieving, it's just something on the side. In the same way, there's an enforcement unit of the police service that's supposed to protect intellectual property as well. There again, you have a specialized unit, because it's not really thieving, it's just, taking a little copy here, a little copy there. So that our organization, which was incorporated in 2003, is meant to be part of this so-called knowledge economy that we're building. I left a fairly cushy job at the university to take up this challenge as being part of this knowledge economy. And there's no protection. Your works are being copied willy-nilly and for economic gain. Just
for the purposes of clarification, because I'm glad you made that issue of economic gain. If someone, for example, is making a photocopy of a past paper at exam, so because they can't get the actual book itself and would have no choice but to photocopy it from someone else, is that a violation of the law?
If it's not available from the CXC, and if CXC has given permission to do so, of course it's not a violation of the law. But again, it has to do with respect of people's property. The thing is that no one is against photocopying, and there's a perception that we are against photocopying. Of course you're allowed to photocopy. You're allowed to photocopy bits of a book that you purchased for yourself. The libraries are allowed to photocopy bits for archiving, etc. But we're talking about economic gain, and it's difficult to make that distinction sometimes. If we go back to the agriculture analogy, if you have one mango tree in your yard and people pass in and pick a mango or two, I mean, although it's still stealing, and they should really ask you, people tend to be easier on that than if you had an orchard and a guy pulls up with a pickup, shake down all your mango trees, damage them, and drive off, for economic gain. Yeah. And I think it's a matter of scale and scope and intent. And that is what the law addresses quite quite strenuously in terms of identifying what areas of archiving, of reproducing that you need a license for.
You say,
and that is what that's what we're
you
about.
say it's stated strenuously, the issue will be about the enforcement of it, but before we get to that, Mr. Stockmore, you are here in Trinidad and Tobago for a session that is being held, well, Monday while we're recording this, and of course it's being viewed by our audience on Tuesday afternoon. You're also due to go to Barbados as well to have further dialogue on these matters. Is this an issue, the enforcement of the legislation in other parts of the world?
Enforcement is a part of it, yes, absolutely. And also here, but I think that to enforce it, you also need to enable people to make copies when it's legitimate to make copies. And I don't think it's strange to anybody that if a university, for instance, needs to put together a course pack, picking an article that is out of print or picking an article that is out of distribution, or a chapter from this book, a chapter from that book, that they shouldn't be allowed to do that. I think they should. But then you need to do it under a license, under an agreement with a TTRRO, for instance, here in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is what is happening also throughout the world.
Are there challenges in other jurisdictions, not just in the Caribbean, not just in Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, with one, the legislation being effective, and two, the support structures, the enforcement? Because it's one thing to have legislation, but if it's not being acted upon, it's useless.
That's right. And I think that, yes, you have these issues all over the world. But when in many parts of the world, it's also strongly supported by the intellectual property offices and the governments. And in these countries, they are successful. And this is also what has happened in other countries in the Caribbean, like, for instance, Jamaica, that has a successful RRO that is licensing universities, licensing administration, education, etc.
What is the situation here in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Maximay? Because again, we know the culture in TNT. People, even the music, they sample music from established music all over, and people see nothing wrong with that. Are you fighting a losing battle?
I don't think so. I mean, I've staked the rest of my career on it, on the fact that we are going to have a knowledge-based economy, that we are going to respect intellectual property. I was a member of the cabinet-appointed committee that drafted the intellectual property policy for the country, which is yet to be fully enforced, as you would appreciate. But what is striking is that the current Prime Minister was once Minister of Legal Affairs and fought strenuously for these things. I mean, I remember part of the campaigns mounted during her reign as Minister of Legal Affairs. So that academics and politicians have been saying for years that this is the way forward for the country, that we need to have a knowledge-based economy, that our intellectual power is what is going to separate us from the rest of the world. We keep taunting that we are TRIPS compliance, TRIPS being the trade-related intellectual property rights, so that every single business person looking at this should be thinking, you know, how am I going to be competitive? We've brought Professor Michael Porter, we had all these fancy seminars on competitiveness. How can you be competitive worldwide if you live in a country that is not respecting intellectual property and intellectual property rights? Your foreign direct investment, I mean, your world trading, everything is on the balance here. And I think it would be hilarious if it wasn't so serious.
Mr. Stockmore, how relevant is an issue like photocopies in 2011 with the internet, with people just simply downloading a copy of something and just emailing it to someone else? The argument might be put forward that there is not enough activity as far as photocopies, for example, are concerned to make it that much of an issue.
It's a fair question, and but photocopying is still rampant, and these organizations, they do not only do photocopying, because they also do other types of reproduction, like digitization, like copying from electronic originals, like downloading from internet for the posting to the internal networks, and for the printing out of inclusion in PowerPoint presentation, projection to whiteboards, smart boards, etc. So photocopying is only a part of it. It goes beyond there.
And has your organization, the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organizations, has there been any study done to show the economic impact on the failure to comply, or in jurisdictions where it works very well?
Absolutely, and there are a few sectors in society that actually contribute that much to economy and employment as the industry is based on copyright. And these are not only IFRRO studies; these are studies made with the support of WIPO, the UN body that is responsible for copyright and copyright-related matters. And there are studies made in over 20 countries now, and it shows regularly that it's between the contribution to the economy is between 5 and 6%, and to the employment the same.
5 and 6%, that's a significant amount?
That's a significant amount, yes. And it goes up to more than 10% in countries like Australia, US, etc., where they're really protecting copyright and pushing it. And also in Jamaica, it's close to 5%.
Can such enforcement really take place in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Maximay? Because, again, it's all well and good to work toward, you say you're dedicating the rest of your working life towards achieving that objective. Some will say you're dedicating the rest of your life to frustration.
No, they said that when I started a career in agriculture as well. So I don't know.
So you're accustomed to being frustrated then?
I'm accustomed to being frustrated, or being into industries where there's a lack of respect for the output. And I'm saying this in the same sense. I mean, I hate to beat the agriculture analogy to that, but I think it's easier to comprehend when you think of tangible property. The fact that somebody can steal your work, you know, the benefits of your labor, you know, that to me is significant. And I don't think that we are fighting a losing battle. I think we are going through a process. We have a process. There are a series of activities you have to do before you get to litigation.
Yes.
So basically what we are doing is we are making sure that we are informing the public. We had a seminar last October. I've been on the, you know, doing the talk show route, so that the ignorance of the law, or the ignorance of what they're doing, it will no longer apply. So when we get to that phase that involves litigation, let's say, no one will be able to say, you know, well, I really didn't know we couldn't do that and we couldn't do this. Because I know we have a if I didn't know society here.
Exactly.
You know,
so. Well, before we conclude the interview, if someone would like to get more information about this whole question of these rights, the reprographic rights, who do they contact? How do they get in touch?
The TTRO, there's TTRO.org, TTRO.org. You can telephone us at 638-2858.
638-2858. And the follow-ups to the information blitz that you might be providing via the talk shows and so on, it requires a tremendous amount of information being put out there. How is that being done?
Well, it has been done and it is continuing. Remember, we were incorporated in 2003. I mean, we have sent out licenses.
Are you seeing the results of that, all of that information coming out?
Yes, in the sense that I think more people are aware that they're infringing. Can I just share a little for instance with you? I've met with the heads of most of the major tertiary level institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. And at one particular interview, the head of that particular tertiary level institution said, you know, when I was working in the US, I mean, we know we had to get a license, you know, but
yeah,
it got the bottom because it's still be here in Trinidad. I mean, why should we worry about that? I mean, and I've been told to my face, we're not bothering.
Yes.
And when you look at how onerous the laws for non-compliance are, the loss of prestige that would accrue to any university that is dragged through the courts for something as mundane as this, because this is probably going to cost the average student in a tertiary level institution at postgraduate level $8 or $9 a month. In terms of what the license will cost, right?
Yes.
For you to be able to copy, you know, legally and legitimately all the material that you need. We have had another, for instance, sorry to dominate. I'm very passionate about this because we have had instances where one of our members, because the membership of the TTRO is made up of authors, publishers, people involved in the knowledge economy. We have had an instance where a lecturer went into a bookstore owned by one of our members. Could you copy this book for me, please? Wholesale, and this is a book that they're selling. Can you copy this book for me, please? And lecturers are selling course packs. I mean, you know, it defies further description, and that's what I can say. It defies further description.
There's certainly a challenge there as far as the knowledge-based economy, to get that knowledge out and an awareness, and hence the presence of Mr. Stockmore here in Trinidad and Tobago. Thanks very much for coming in, sir, and we certainly hope that you continue to fight the good fight.